pharma patents are a bit special, but they should be treated like normal patents as far as possible. I'd like to briefly comment on two issues which are not exclusively related to pharma patent, but have special importance when it comes to pharma patents. The first topic is inspired by the US case law on the relevance of using laws of nature in biotech inventions. Novelty requires a new technical teaching. That sounds trivial, you may say, but I think it is not trivial, but very important. We are used to talk about a new device or a new compound and think that's the invention, but that's not true. The new device or the new compound is covered by the invention, but the invention is a technical teaching to make the new device or to make available the new compound, and that's a very important difference. To foster pharmaceutical innovation, any specific use of any specific use of a known substance for therapeutic treatment is patentable, at least in Europe, if the specific use is new and involves an inventive step. A discovery as such does not establish a new technical teaching, but nevertheless an invention may be based on a discovery of a natural biological mechanism. And which is more important, when assessing inventive step, the discovery must not be disregarded only because the discovery itself is not patentable or not patent eligible, as the more common term in the United States and other countries is. This is relevant in two aspects. It may have consequences in favor of the patentee or just the other way around. The first example is a decision we made in 2011, where we said the discovery of a function of an active agent which serves as an agonist against a certain pathologic status linked to a certain disease. In this case, it was Alzheimer's disease. The discovery of the function does not establish a new technical teaching if treatment of patients suffering from said disease was known in prior art, and neither a new group of patients is treated, so far, a group so far not treated by the known compound, nor a new dosage regime is given by the invention. So it's a very valuable discovery to know and to describe the exact biological mechanism, how the compound works, but if the technical teaching to treat the patient is not different from what was known in prior art, that does not justify a new patent. On the other hand, if you have a new technical teaching, in this case, a patent for a nucleic acid encoding a certain receptor type protein kinase, then by the patent eligible subject matter is covered regardless of whether the teaching also contains an inventive concept that amounts to significantly more than the use of the law of nature, which is the basis of the invention. So there is in this respect, a huge difference between the US case law and the European view on the very same problem. So when assessing the patentability, especially the inventive step, it is not possible to ignore the question whether the underlying law of nature was obvious to a skilled person. To put it differently, the most relevant aspect of inventive step may be the discovery of the law of nature and then use it without any further inventive effort, then use this law of nature in a so far unknown way to cause a certain effect, to treat patients or whatever. Second aspect, evergreening. Because of the enormous financial impact of a pharma patent, there's of course always incentive to evergreening. The result that a company owning a pharma patent tries to prolongate patent protection by reapplying for minor variations of the existing drug. Of course, that's possible and that may be justified, but in other cases it may not be justified. An unexpected effect or advantage may support the inventive step, the inventiveness of the variation of a well-known substance. However, according to our case law, our jurisprudence, an unexpected effect is not sufficient for inventive step if the technical teaching of the invention was obvious or obvious to try anyway, and therefore its improved efficacy, the unexpected effect, relates to a mere so-called bonus effect. If it was obvious anyway to do something, a patent is not justified only because the effect is much better than expected. At least that is our view on these problems. There's a very recent decision which relates to this problem. It's not the only one which is relevant. It was a patent about formulation formulation for a noun drug, which was a bit what was not so easy to find, and tolerable and efficient formulation. And the question was it obvious for a skilled person to try a certain formulation? And we said it may depend. That is a well-known sentence. It may depend on a reasonable expectation of success, whether it is obvious to a skilled person to choose and pursue a certain approach. Which degree of expectation of success is necessary depends on the individual case. What is important is the respective field of art, the size of the relevant incentive, the efforts required by a certain part, and of course the possible alternatives. All this has to be considered, and of course the respective advantages and disadvantages. If the problem relates to a suitable formulation of a drug, it is as a rule not decisive whether the skilled person can expect to find a result that justifies a clinical trial. A reasonable expectation of success may already arise from the possibility of verifying efficacy and tolerability of the formulation in an animal experiment, an experiment which has sufficient predictive value for therapeutic use in humans. In this respect, we disagree with the European Patent, the Board of Appeal of the European Patent Office, which found the patent valid because the skilled person couldn't expect to be in a position to use the formulation of the compound in a clinical trial, but we thought it was sufficient that the skilled person had very good reason to use the formulation in an experiment with rabbits to find out whether it worked, because that was exactly what the patent itself did. The patent showed that the compound and the formulation of the compound worked in a rabbit experiment, and we thought the same yardstick should apply when it comes to the question of inventive step. Thank you very much. I'm, of course, not a specialist in common law, but it's interesting to see that some common law countries are reluctant to follow the activist Lilly decision of the UK Supreme Court, but stick to the Kieran Amgen decision of the House of Lords. Some people think that it might have been the Kieran Amgen decision of the House of Lords, which deviated from the older common law English House of Lords decision, which didn't use the term doctrine of equivalence, but applied a similar concept, and the activist Lilly decision may be seen as a decision which brings current UK law closer to the case law of other European countries, but at least in some respect, but also closer back to the English tradition of determining the scope of patent protection. There's a brilliant article written by the late Hugh Leddy, who analyzed the history of equivalence decisions in English law before Kieran Amgen and after Kieran Amgen, and the activist Lilly case may be seen as an example of going back to the English traditional view on the one hand, but at the same time coming closer to other European countries. And I agree with George. It's of course it sounds quite different to the US approach of looking for comparing way and results of the invention. But I think at the very end we look for similar questions. We look for the technical effect, which may be at least similar, or as we say, identical with the effect which is produced by the invention itself, and then we have to determine how. And the way is never the very same. If the way were the very same, there were no need to talk about equivalence. The way is always similar, and then the only remaining question is how to determine the necessary similarity between the different ways. And there are some differences. Remaining difference between Germany and the United Kingdom, and difference between Europe and Germany and Europe and the US and Japan. But I think very often the results are nevertheless the same or at least similar, and I think it's only an attempt to find an exact decision of comparing the different ways and deciding whether they are close